Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Freestyle Art with LDF Designs. In this video, I'm picking up on this piece that I started earlier. I had applied some concrete and plaster and tar to this cradled panel, and at this point, I am just starting to put the composition together by adding some rusty nails into the fabric. In pieces where I finish the sides with encaustic, I usually start by applying the encaustic to the sides first. Usually I like to have the tip of the brushes facing the front of the artwork so that if there are any runs or drips that it goes down onto the art. Um, and then I can either work with those or use those at a later time if I want to incorporate them into the piece. This piece was already a little bit front heavy because of the concrete that I had added to the front, so I did have to maneuver it quite a bit in order to keep it upright while I was working on the sides. And then when I wanted to do the ends here, because it was so tall, of course it was a little bit too close to the camera. So I struggled a little bit with my camera angles. I do apologize for that, but hopefully you'll just work through it with me. Thank you. I decided to make some marks onto the panel with this graphite pencil and thought maybe I would do something with those, but down the road, as you'll see, I ended up covering those up. It's also just a good practice to help stay loose, and mark making, I do mark making just about at every layer of my pieces. This is a Marabou art crayon, and again, just trying to add a little bit of interest to this layer before I start putting the encaustic on. Just about any material that is water soluble will work for mark making underneath encaustic, and sometimes often on top of encaustic. Just note that a lot of this stuff will smear as you brush the hot encaustic over it. So keep that in mind and work, have that work to your advantage, or you'll have to dab it on to try to keep it from smearing if you don't want it to do that. I also added a little bit of white encaustic at this time, just started to work the edge of the piece, trying to come up with the composition here. At this point, I decided to add a little more fabric to the composition, and I took some of the tar that I had and stained the fabric a little bit before I put it on there. I decided I didn't like the blue in those marks as much as I had anticipated. I wanted it to be a little more organic, and I felt like the squares that I had made were taking away from that look a little bit. I dipped the fabric into the encaustic and applied it to the board while it was still hot. Um, and then, of course, I burnished it down just using my fingers. I wanted that white encaustic to run down into the texture of the piece, so I heated it up and just used gravity to help that wax move down into all of the different bumps there on the concrete. At this point, I wanted to bring the piece together a little bit, so I put some vegetable oil into this cup and used this spoon that had some partially dry tar on it to pick up the tone of the tar color and just started working that onto the piece to make it more unified. The color of the tar really is a unique color that you can't quite get from any of the paints, and I do really like the color a lot. It's a real earthy color. I knew I wanted to add another element to the piece. Initially was thinking I wanted to add this rusty piece, but realized it just wasn't going to work. I had a lot of texture down there and it was going to make it difficult to secure that rust. So I grabbed these two cotton pads, they're makeup cotton removal pads, poked some holes in them, and had these two other metal pieces that I decided to poke through those and place those on for the composition. Once I decided what I wanted to do with it, I went ahead and dipped those cotton pads into the encaustic and got them soaked and put my pieces back through and placed them onto the board. I realized later that this changed the composition quite a bit and decided to call this piece the Sisters. I started out using this part of a metal straw to create some marks onto these. But because it was metal, it tended to pull the wax up. So in the end, I went back and put other marks over it. And down the road here, you'll see I just used a regular old plastic straw to get the job done. I realized that that side was completely bare, so went ahead and added some texture to it. I have this paint called Asphaltum. It's a transparent paint. I really liked it, and I thought it went well with the color scheme of this piece, so I pulled it out and started using it to add some more color to it. Those cotton pads tend to soak the wax up quite a bit. They will drink it, is how I like to describe it. And so what happens is the surface of the cotton pad is not a completely waxed surface. And so when you put the paint on there, then the cotton also absorbs that oil paint. And it creates a different look than maybe if you were just putting it on a solid wax surface. I don't know if I can describe it very well, but as you can see, the paint doesn't clear off of it quite as well as it does just the wax surface. I still wasn't quite happy with the color of those, and they really did absorb a lot of the wax, so I went ahead and added more wax onto the surface of those cotton pads. For one, that will help secure the marks that I made on that previous layer, but also it'll give me a little more versatility to work that surface a little more, adding colors and texture. While those pads were cooling again, I went ahead and worked a little more on the sides of the panel. Now I realize that that tar definitely had a very black look to it underneath the encaustic on this piece. So I went ahead and pulled out my black paint and decided to add some of that into some areas. Again, just trying to bring a unity to the piece with the different colors and shapes. Sometimes when I have a lot of added elements, it can be challenging to get the oil and excess paint off around where the elements come together in the cracks. So I will use different tools that I have to get down into those cracks and those crevices to try to get that additional oil out of the painting. I knew at this point that it was getting close to being finished, but I wasn't quite sure if it needed anything else. So as I continued to look at it, I decided I wanted to add a little more cheesecloth to a section. Went ahead and dipped that in to the encaustic and applied it to the edge here. At this point, as I was looking it over, I thought maybe it needed just a little more light. So I added just a finishing layer of white encaustic Again, just to try to create a little more area of contrast and give it a little more depth. One final fuse with the blowtorch, and I think that just about wraps this piece up. And here are the sisters. Thank you for watching. Feel free to give me a like and subscribe. I'd love to see you come back.